What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with my dad, Jon Dalzell, for a post-couple losses edition of You Got Boston. We'll talk a little bit about yesterday's game, but honestly, I think the more important thing than specifically yesterday's game is just, I guess, how this team has been struggling of late and just the feeling of panic around the month of December, and they've lost 4 of 6 and they're 6-5 in their last 11. And everybody now has heard all of the statistics around the fact that this has been one of their more losing stretches in recent memory. Definitely since I started covering this team, there really has been no adversity. So for me, I'm not used to covering losses. And Derek White said post-game yesterday that this is the most challenging stretch that he's experienced as a player since he got to Boston. And you may remember he got to Boston and then they basically haven't gone through a losing stretch since. So before we start, I'll have my dad introduce himself just to give a little bit of context on why we decided to pull him into the show. And I'll just say, but maybe before I hand it over to him, we were on the phone earlier and I was kind of curious for his thoughts about the loss and just about what they're going through in general. And he started giving me some of his thoughts and I was like, wait, hold up. Like, let's save this for a podcast because they were some good thoughts. So I figured I just would, instead of having him say it to me on the phone, we'd save it for this. And that's what we're doing. So, why don't you maybe introduce yourself a little bit in case there are some first-time listeners that you've been on here a couple times, and then we'll talk about what it means to play without effort, which I think is everybody's concern right now.
Okay, well, it's good to be back. Thank you for inviting me. And for those that I haven't introduced myself, my name is Jon Dalzell. I'm Noah's dad. Played high school, college, professional basketball overseas, came from a basketball family. Basketball has always been a huge part of my life and continues to be a huge part of my life. I still play basketball 4 nights a week, and I love the game, and I love talking about the game. Although usually I've spent my time talking with friends and most of the time with you before you got into the media, and now it's interesting because I'm paying particular attention, which I never actually did. I always was a great fan of watching the game, and I had my own thoughts, and usually they were a lot different than what I was listening to coming from the media. And I, in general, never really listened to the media. I like watching the basketball games, and when the game was over, I would immediately, kind of turn it off and go my own way. And now, because you are involved in the media, I've started obviously following the podcast that you do and the post game things that you do and the analyzations that you and your colleagues do. And so I've started listening even more to some of the things that have been happening and some of the things that the media has to say. And it's interesting because it's a lot different than, of course, what I think. And I think that that's some of the thoughts that I've shared with you. And maybe that's what you found a little bit different than what the general talk is of the town right now, particularly with what's going on with the Celtics and last month of basketball that they've played, and how is everybody interpreting that, and what do they actually think about what's going on with this team? I find it really fascinating. So that's what we were talking about today on the phone, and I guess it'd be nice to share with your audience as well.
So we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to play without effort and why we're seeing that, because I think that's people are sitting at home and they're like, why are they not trying? I'm so frustrated watching this team. I bought Christmas Day presents for my kids, and then they came out and they didn't show up for the 76ers game, and they didn't really bounce back with a bunch of wins like we expected. So feel free to put questions in the chat as we go along here. And then at the same time, we're going to just talk through some things as well, but we're also happy to do questions. So I haven't been doing as many of these live shows. We've been doing more kind of post-game reactions, but yeah, feel free anything at all, Celtics, NBA related questions. We're happy to kind of talk through these as well. We'll probably do about a 30-minute show. But I want to start at the top. And I think that, if you look at the schedule over the last couple of games, they've lost 3 or 4. There was the loss to Indiana yesterday. There was the loss on Christmas to the 76ers, to Orlando against a very shorthanded Orlando team. There was the Bulls loss. There was the Grizzlies loss. So, I think they've, none of those teams are like contenders, or maybe Memphis, but for the most part, these are not like the NBA's most elite teams. And there's been some questions around like maybe it's harder to get up for those games too, especially when you've played 82 games in a season and then the playoffs and the Olympics. It's like at a certain point, it's more and more games. So curious for your standpoint. We were asking the players yesterday. We asked, Tatum, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Mazzulla, if it's an effort issue. And it's like everybody's frustrated. They want to turn it around. They're not happy to be sitting there after a loss, right? So what is, I guess, your theory or your thinking around why it looks when you turn on the TV that this team is playing with low intensity or low effort, or at least not playing as hard as we're used to them playing?
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're hearing a lot of right now is, and I watched the press conferences and I heard the same thing that you have been hearing and other fans are hearing. And effort is really the wrong word. It's really the wrong way of thinking, in my opinion, because it's not about effort. These guys haven't decided all of a sudden that they're not going to give it 100%. They're all of a sudden not going to stop playing hard and trying and giving effort. It's not about that. It's really truly not about that. And I think anybody that's out there that's played, a lot of basketball games, and I'm talking about maybe at a high level, to put it that way, college, professional, whatever, that you've played where it actually means a lot, and there's a lot on the line, and there's people watching, there's critics that are going to be following up after the game, there's going to be media waiting for you. There's a lot of pressure on these guys. And it doesn't matter that they won a championship last year. That relieves the pressure for 10 minutes. And then the next season starts and everybody has even higher expectations that can they do it again? Should they do it again? Why can't they do it again? And all that. So when you translate what's going on with the game and how it looks, it's not about these guys not giving an effort. It's about they're just not playing well right now. They're just not playing well, and everybody's talking about it was interesting. I was listening last night. They're talking about the 3-point shooting. They're going to live and die by the 3-point. Of course, they're going to live and die by the 3-point. They're a bunch of great shooters, and these guys are going to continue to shoot threes, and they will come back. And they're not going to change the way that they look at the game of basketball because they're in a little bit of a slump. They're just going to continue to do what they're doing, and they're going to come back, and they're going to get their confidence back, as everyone knows. That it's all about confidence. It's all about whether you believe in what you're doing, and whether you believe in what you're saying, and it's about confidence. It's about really doing the right things at the right time, and playing the game that how to play the game, and backing it up on the court. And right now, things are not working out. Things are just not. The ball's not dropping. Guys are not playing well. The thing is just not going the way that it should be going. And of course, then it gets in your head, and it doesn't matter if you're a max player or if you're a guy that you're a two-way player. It's the way that the game was designed, is that it's about what you believe that you can do at that particular moment. And there's guys that are questioning themselves on the court right now, and you're doubting yourself, and you're tightening up a little bit, and the balls that you usually would get your hands on, or the defensive play that you would usually make, you're missing it by a fraction of an inch. Derek White's going up for a block, and instead of getting the block, he's getting a foul, or he's missing the block, and maybe things are just not happening the way that they were happening when everything is falling into place. But the key is, and I think this is for your fans, is that this is not a time to panic and start looking at the game as if something's different. These are the same guys that led this team to a championship. And they will snap out of it very, very quickly, and they will turn it around. And that's what's going to happen. And it may happen next game, and it may take them a few days. It may take them a few games to get back on track, and they will get going. And then they'll have another, they may have another lull along the way. This is the way that the game of basketball is, and you have to accept it, or you better find another sport. That's the way I see it. And it's absolutely not about effort. It just doesn't really translate into that word. It's really wrong to be thinking that. But they need to get their confidence back. They need to get that looseness and that confidence that, like, I watched Derek White play in the last few games, and he just doesn't look the same. And I think people are talking about that because he was the most loosey-goosey player I think I've ever seen. He's the guy that in the championship series catches the ball with the world riding on it in the corner and shoots it like he's out in his backyard. I mean, he just loose as a goose, and the ball just kind of freely flows out of his hand, and you know that he's going to make it, and he does make it. And right now he doesn't look like that. But he's the same guy, and he will get it back, and he will be back. So that's my take on the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that maybe doesn't translate for people, is this idea of confidence versus effort, or like being in a rhythm. Like, I feel like if someone's missing a bunch of shots, then it's easy to say, you know, they're in a shooting slump. But you can be in a slump where you're not as, you know, your instincts are not as quick, or you're not making the right plays, your decision making's off, or whatever it is. And it does seem to be pretty contagious. And it's not that they've shied away from, like, I think it might look like an effort thing even to them. Like, you know, Tatum was saying we need to communicate better defensively, but it's not, to me, it's like they didn't stop communicating defensively because all of a sudden they hate each other, all of a sudden they don't care about defense. It's like they're not in that rhythm or that flow where it's like everything is kind of firing on all cylinders. And if you think about like the 2022 team, the way that they flipped a switch, you know, mid-season and went from being one of the, you know, a very mediocre team to the best team in the league and then making the finals, it's like something clicked for them. And then all of a sudden they're going out there every night and they're like ready to kill people. And I think that they felt that for a lot of last season and a lot of the playoffs and for the beginning of this year. And it's just harder when you're in that slump to come out of it than I think people expect or hope, because it's not just like, okay, now we're going to show up and we're going to try really hard, and we haven't been trying really hard. And honestly, like the game that maybe people can recall is game 4 of the finals last year. The Celtics are up 3-0. They have a chance in Dallas to close it out and win the championship. And I remember, you know, being in Dallas, there were so many Celtics fans that flew in to, you know, see the championship happen and everything. And it's like, we all kind of expected it to happen. I remember even in the morning, we talked to Sam Hauser and shoot around, and it was like, he couldn't even really answer our questions. There was so much anticipation. And I was already pre-writing like the championship story. I was so sure, like they won 3-0. They're going to sweep them. The Mavericks are done. Yeah. And then all that happened is that Dallas literally came out and beat them by 40. I mean, it was like the worst game I'd ever seen them play since I started covering the team. And it was like they weren't running back on defense. They weren't rebounding. I was like, what? Do they not want to win the championship? And it's like, obviously, nobody woke up that day and said, I'm not going to try hard tonight, right? Like that's, you know, it was the biggest game of their entire lives. And so sometimes it's like you get tight, right? And I think we've seen that in the past with like Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals versus Miami, that all of a sudden it's like, you know, it's contagious and everybody's like, they almost try to overcompensate one play from another and that sort of thing. And yeah, I think in this case, it certainly has been a little bit different because these aren't like high pressure games per se, but there's pressure now because now the narrative is like, wait a second, they're losing all their games. Like, so now there's pressure, right? Every single, like there isn't like, the Pacers aren't a bad team, and they played really well yesterday, I thought. And Tyrese Halliburton
they played great yesterday, by the way.
Yeah,
you can't deny that the Pacers would have beaten anybody by 25 points last night that we were playing. Probably the only team that beat by 30 were the Celtics, in my opinion.
And I think like there are things defensively where I felt like they weren't shooting a lot of threes. They kept driving to the basket, and the Celtics were kind of playing them for threes. And at a certain point, it's like when you go back, like Jaylen Brown said post-game, like we probably could have played more help defense instead of worrying about them kicking it out, because that's not where they were beating us. And so it's like hindsight's 2020, obviously. But yeah, I think that's certainly a part of it, is like, you know, sometimes teams also just play well and they're not going to win. But had they just lost yesterday's game and it was a normal stretch where they had just won 6 in a row, it wouldn't have been a whole discussion. But because they've been losing, it's like now every game, like tomorrow's game, it's a game versus the Raptors on New Year's Eve at 3:00. They're notoriously bad playing in the afternoons. Raptors have lost 10 in a row. If they lose tomorrow, it's like a disaster, right? But
and that's the thing. That's the thing is they know that they know what's going on outside the locker room. They know what's going to happen if they lose that game. It's not just a game anymore. It's a game attached to a bunch of other things that have happened, and that puts pressure on these guys. The thing that's always fascinating to me is that people forget that these guys are actually human beings. They are people. They drive to practice in their cars. They get upset when somebody cuts them off. They have to deal with their families and the things that go on in their own personal lives and everything else. They are absolutely human beings in every way. And when they're going into a game like the game that you're describing tomorrow, they're all thinking about. Everybody's talking about what's wrong with us. Everybody's talking about. You think that they're not? Then you're missing something that's probably one of the most interesting things about professional sports and professional basketball, is that they have to deal with all that, and they have to deal with it under a microscope. You know, we were talking the other day about Jaylen Brown. everybody was like, what's the matter with him? What's going on with him? He doesn't seem like he's not okay. That's what the talk of the media was for about 5 minutes. Then he went out and dropped 40 the next game and dominated everybody and looked like he was having the time of his life on the court and looked happy. And afterwards he was speaking to the press and everything was beautiful. This is what these guys have to deal with on a regular basis. And that has an effect. There's no way around it. So it affects players more than others. But it has an effect on them, and it's going to affect the team. And the only way to get it off their backs is to win 4 or 5 games in a row. And then they're going to get that looseness about them, and they're going to get their confidence back, and then they're going to look like nobody's going to be talking about effort anymore. All of that stuff is going to go away. And the only way that it will go away is by winning basketball games. And that's the way it always is, and that's the way it's always going to be.
Yeah, I agree with that, honestly. And I feel like it's easy when you're watching, especially when you're there in the building. It's like you see things like they're almost processing things. So honestly, Jalen's a great example because everybody knows he's so competitive. Everybody knows he's so hardworking. Like you've never met a single person that knows him that hasn't described him as incredibly hardworking and motivated. And sometimes you watch him on the court and it's like his processing is just slower. Like all of a sudden he's getting, there's a play that he's getting backdoor cut, or you can see that he's thinking about the last play still and 10 minutes have passed, that sort of thing. Yep. And so I don't know. I think, there's a certain flow that maybe is underestimated when it comes to everything outside of like 3-point shooting, which everybody kind of acknowledges and agrees upon that it's hot and cold. And then Jalen has had a really great stretch here where, I asked him to describe what it felt like. And he was like, there's a rhythm where you're not thinking about anything other than basketball. You don't notice the refs calls. It's just you, the basket, the fans, but you're not, and you almost have to make sure you don't break out of it. That was interesting to me that he was saying you have to make a point to not complain to the refs or something. You have to make sure you're locked into it. And Absolutely. Sometimes you're completely out of that rhythm and you're trying to figure out a way to get in and they haven't really been in it.
Absolutely. I've always, I may have said this too, but for me, it sounds a little bit silly, but it's actually the exact way that I look at basketball. Basketball is kind of like music. There's something musical about it, and you sometimes feel like you're exactly in sync with the music, and when you do, then everything just seems so easy and effortless. And that's where the word effort should be used, because then everything is effortless. You fly down the court, you block shots, the ball feels light in your hand. Everything is just everything is easy. And when things are not, and you're not in rhythm with the music, you don't hear it right, then everything is a struggle. And anybody that's out there that has played the game of basketball knows exactly what I'm talking about. And those of you that haven't, then it may be a little bit more difficult to understand exactly what that must feel like. And maybe you can apply it to other things that you do in your life or other sports that you've played. But it's exactly like that. And sometimes when you're out of sync and it becomes contagious, where all of a sudden it looks like the whole team seems to be listening to a different song or something, and it looks strange, and it looks like something's wrong with the team, and why are they not playing hard, and why are they not getting back on defense, and all of that is the way that it kind of materializes itself on the court. But it's all part of the psyche of the game. It's not about that these guys don't want to play anymore, or they just don't feel like playing tonight, or they come out on Christmas Day and don't really feel like giving an effort. It looks like that. And I think that's what I think Jaylen Brown was apologizing for, that he said, I felt bad that people came to the Garden with their kids as a Christmas present. We went out there and played not well at all, but it wasn't because they didn't want to play. I'm sure that they were dying to put on a show on Christmas Day in front of their fans and the national television, but it just didn't work out. But it is what it is, it's a game that if you can't enjoy that part of it as well, then you're really not, it's not realistic of you to really say that you understand the game of basketball. That's the way I see it.
We got a couple questions here, but before that, we're just going to hear from our friends over at PrizePicks.
PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. you can pick anything that you think is likely to happen. So I would pick Peyton Pritchard, certain number of threes, whatever it is, pretty safe, assurance at this point that he is going to hit that. Anything that you feel has been a pretty consistent pattern, those are the types of trends that you can capitalize on Prize Picks. You can make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. Join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
So we got a couple questions here. As you know, there's one home game tomorrow. Celtics play the Raptors, who have been one of the worst teams in the league this season. They've just lost 10 in a row. They're calling it I don't know if you've heard this term, but they're calling it capture the flag. That's the race to the bottom to get Cooper Flag as the number 1 pick.
Oh.
So that they're coming from a very different standpoint. Obviously, we know in the NBA that doesn't mean anything, that they could come in tomorrow and play rejuvenated and beat the Celtics. But tomorrow's not the game that's going to be like, and I don't think anybody's going to be super impressed with a win here, regardless. But they go out west. They're going to be in Minnesota, which they've really turned it around as of late. Houston, who's had the second best defense in the league. Minnesota's also up there, one of the top defenses. Then they play Oklahoma City, who's been one of the best teams in the NBA all season. They've won 11 in a row because the Commissioner Cup game actually doesn't count. They've won 11 in a row. And then they play the Denver Nuggets, who have not been the same Denver Nuggets from the past, but at the same time, they've also beaten them the last couple of times they faced off in the regular season. So this is a really tough road trip. Southsiders here asks, question for Noah and Jon, what is the one thing they should focus on to get out of this funk? So curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Win a few basketball games in a row.
So it's nothing that they have to do at this point.
No. It's like something when a shooter's in a slump, everybody's talking about how can he get out of it? How what should he do? Go in the gym and practice your shot for 9 hours a day. Reanalyze your shooting form and everything else. There's only one thing that gets a shooter out of a slump. It's making like 10 shots in a row in a game or going 8 for 10, and then all of a sudden that shooting slump that everybody was obsessed with, maybe for days and games and weeks, all of a sudden it's gone. It's not a miracle. It's just that's the way that it works. Once the confidence is back and they start to really hear that music and start to feel like they're all on the same page again and they're in a flow, then they're going to be the same thing that they were last year, that they were, just kind of rocketing through the league, just taking no prisoners. That's the only thing that will do it. It's not going to happen in practice. It's not going to happen in, one-on-one sessions with players and all that kind of stuff. I've been through a lot of that stuff, and there's only one thing that really works, and that's going out and playing really well, and they will, and they'll get that feeling back, and then all this funk that you're describing will be long gone.
And then the ARC here has a question about how much of the responsibility is on the head coach to have them ready and motivated to play. What can he do? These are grown men, millionaires. Who's responsible to have them ready? This is a good question because I think we see Joe. We talk to Joe more than anybody. We talk to him before and after every single game and during every practice. So he almost has to answer for the shortcomings or the product that we're seeing on the floor. And I don't know that he's always the best position to answer because he might be sitting there being like, I don't know why they're in a funk too. So I don't know. What do you think? What's his responsibility here?
Yeah, I mean, his responsibility, I think, is to really protect his team at this point, and to not to do what some coaches do, which is start outing guys for how they're not playing up to the level that he expects of them. That's nonsense to do that. That's where you lose the locker room or you lose respect of your own players. I think he knows, and I think he does that really, really well. I think he knows that. I think all the players know that he's got their back. He's going to protect them from, any kind of, ridiculous criticism from anybody around, the press, whatever. But his responsibility, again, if I were one of these guys, I know what I would want out of my coach. I'd want him to relax, to figure out ways to take the pressure off a little bit. To make sure that, when you see guys that are starting to get down on themselves, and that's probably the biggest problem when you have guys that are, not everybody is mentally tough. There's just like physically, there's differences between these guys. Mentally, there's huge differences, and it's very hard to figure out who's who until things start to go wrong.
Yeah.
And this, the same guy that was extremely, we would consider as extremely confident player, maybe has never gone through something like this. Even in maybe they have, maybe they haven't, and some of them are, can be struggling with it. And the coaches, I think the coach's biggest responsibility is to recognize who's struggling right now. Jason Tatum might be like laughing at this whole thing that the guys are, I don't know. I don't know these players personally.
I would say this from covering this team and like just their backgrounds. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I would say are very this, especially, especially after last year.
Yeah.
But also just thinking about their tenure. I'm hearing some feedback. If maybe you can mute while I'm talking. But especially I think after winning the championship, like it's even more so because they have their finals MVP, he has their finals MVP, they have the championship trophy. Think about the stuff they went through beforehand with the Kyrie Irving years, maybe we're going to trade Jaylen Brown and for Kevin Durant. Like this is kind of nothing, and especially so, but then there's guys like Sam Hauser and there's guys like Derek White.
Exactly.
Who, those are the two guys. And I don't want to like speak like I've talked to them and they've told me this, but both of them, to me, have been putting their heads down so much where it's like just the most visible thing where it feels like they're getting discouraged. And then when you think about them as players, Derek White has talked very openly about how before he got to Boston and before he got really comfortable, he was not confident in himself. And he didn't know that he was capable of doing the things that he was able to do. And the Joe spoke that confidence in him. And then we saw last year's season as a result of that. And I don't want to be too hard on him because he's honestly been fine. And he's actually found a good rhythm here offensively. But you can see from watching him that he's not exactly the same confidence, smoothness, decision-making that we saw at points last year. And he's somebody that I think probably needs to snap out of it. Hauser looks very rattled to me by the fact that he's been dealing with what I think is probably a debilitating pain, like the fact that he's dealing with back spasms and things, and he's still playing through it. And then he's coming to the bench and he's putting a hot pad on and he's going back in and he's like, I don't know if people realize, I don't know if people have had back issues. I know you've had back surgeries while you were playing, but maybe you can give us a little bit of it. Maybe actually on that point, like, everybody's been so hard on Hauser, and I really feel bad for him because he's never in his entire life, high school, college, or NBA, shot below 40% from three in a season. Like, he's as consistent of a three-point shooter as you'll find. And this season, he's like at 36%, which is actually league average. But for him, that's very low. And people are very concerned about the contract that he signed, and is he not a good player anymore, or was last year a fluke? Like, I know we don't know exactly what his thing is that he's having with his back, but it's been going on all year. Like, what is it like to be a basketball player and play through back pain?
It's torture. And anybody who's been through back pain, to go get in your car and drive to practice can be a painful experience. So you can imagine what he might be going through. I don't know what the level, and I don't know what injury he's going through, but anything with back is really, really difficult. And one thing I can tell you just from my own personal experience, my own career, as a shooter, is that if you have any kind of injury that you're dealing with, particularly with back, particularly with like movement and being able to move loosely, it affects your shot. And it affects it not in a little way, in a big way. Just think about it. He's shooting the ball from 25, 27 feet, however he shoots from way out, and that you have to be right on target. With everything, with all the mechanics, they have to be perfect. And if all of a sudden your back is a little bit off, then you immediately have to adjust it by using more of your arms, a little bit more wrist, a little bit more whatever. And all of a sudden the same shot that you've had, kind of your entire life is now affected by it. And that's I mean, I can't even imagine what he might possibly be going through. Again, this is all, the kind of word on the street stuff, what's going on. I don't know if anybody knows exactly what level he's at.
We don't know exactly. We
don't know, but it doesn't matter.
He's not going to go into the details.
It doesn't matter. He's not comfortable right now. And when you're not comfortable, that means that you have to adjust what you're doing. You have to think about what you're doing. And when you're thinking about your shot, you're already in trouble, because a shot has to come just naturally. It has to be, muscle memory and nothing more, nothing less than that. And now all of a sudden you're thinking like, I'm a little bit tight. I got to do this. I got to get myself in a little better position. I got to square up a little bit differently than I used to, right? Just those thoughts alone will screw your shot up, at least to go, to whatever percentage. He went down to 36 where he was last year. Where was it last year? 40 something, 43?
43 or something. Yeah.
43. So that, I mean, you're talking about, you're talking about not a major difference. It's not a collapse of a shot. It's just not shooting the ball as well. And I look at him on the court, and what I see just from, watching on television, he just doesn't look like he's moving comfortably.
No.
And that's tough. And
defensively, I think you notice it too. Like, I don't think that he's able to hold his own the same way. Last year, he was really a good defender. And right now, it's like, I think people are taking advantage of him more than we saw last year. And probably 99% of it is the pain. And then him being in his head about the pain probably too, a little bit.
Absolutely. And then he's tight. And then you have the pain. And then you just missed the 2 shots in a row that that you should make. And then you're running back on defense. You're thinking about the shots you just missed. You're not feeling great anyway. And then you get burned on defense. Welcome to basketball. This is, and he knows it. And I'm sure he's been through rough periods in his life. There's not a basketball player on the planet that hasn't gone through a period where things were just not going well and things were just kind of a struggle. And he knows that he'll snap out of it. The question is, how long it's going to take, and how long is it going to take the whole team to just kind of get back in rhythm. Will it happen tomorrow night? Very possibly. Will it take another week? Could be. You just don't know about these things. But once they get it back, then they'll be the team that they truly are. This is not who they are right now, and they know it.
And I've seen people say, like, maybe while the Hauser's dealing with this, like, don't play him. Like, someone here said they should play Drew Peterson instead. Obviously, we see his minutes are down. I think part of it is probably a minutes restriction with his injury, but Jordan Walsh has gotten more run. What's the balance at this point between if someone's struggling like that? I don't want to overdo it. Like, he hasn't been terrible.
No,
he actually he hit his first couple threes yesterday. The other day he wasn't hitting his threes, so we kind of was taking mid-range shots. But do you feel like there's a certain level of, he's done enough out there to warrant you keep him out there, you let him kind of work it out rather than benching him in favor of somebody who's less proven on the team just because they're healthy, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where you go back to Missoula ball in a way that, I mean, the way that he looks at it, and I find it really, really interesting, and I think it's really really fantastic what he does. The psychology that he uses is that he doesn't really weigh too much on winning each of these individual games. He's looking at the big picture all the time, and that's something that coaches are very, very seldom do. He doesn't. I don't think he's panicking at all. I really don't. I mean, I'm sure he's putting on a face of not panicking, which is being professional. But I think even behind closed doors, I don't think that he's panicking. And I think that what he's doing, like with Jordan Walsh, is it's kind of experimenting. Like he's trying different things, because later on when the game is life or death type stuff, and they're in the playoffs and all this, then he's going to want to know whether that's a good idea to make that move or not. And the only way if that's a good move to make or not is by trying it out during the course of the season, where the games aren't going to weigh too heavily on they're not going to impact what's going to happen later on. And he knows that. And usually coaches don't do that. I mean, coaches are famous for, like, all of a sudden, it's game 7 or game 6, sticking a guy in the game that hasn't played in 2 months. It's like, what is that? Like I mean, even if it works, I mean, how risky can that be? And to put a guy in a position like that, the least that you can do for a player who's not, a starting player, or a guy who's, a player that's constantly coming into the rotation, at least give him some opportunities during the course of the season to feel what it's like to be out there when the game actually does have meaning, not stick him in when the game is down, last 3 minutes when it has no meaning. And he really has mastered that. So by giving Jordan Walsh these opportunities, when there is an opportunity where he's going to need him, where somebody is down, or whether he wants to put him out there as a stopper on defense, Jordan Walsh is going to walk on the court and be familiar with what's happening out there, and it will give him that little bit of comfortability, confidence that a player needs in order to succeed. So he's setting all these guys up, even if it fails during not because of Jordan Walsh that they lose last night, but even if they lose the game, or maybe if he had done some other things, he may have won that game. The big picture is you want to have these guys all prepared and ready to go when the season is actually on the line, and where these games have the utmost importance. So I think he's really I think he's really clever, and he's really has foresight to do things that many coaches would not be willing to even try. And I think there's a lot behind that. I think that, first of all, he just won a championship, so he has job security right now. And I think that, reinforces the way that he believes. So now, it worked last year. So who's going to question him this year? Only a fool was going to question him what he's doing now, because he's already done, what many coaches have never been able to do in their entire careers. So he's got a lot on his side, and the players are completely behind him. So I just think that what he's doing is so somebody's asking about Peterson. Peterson also has had some great opportunities. So he's gotten opportunities that no one ever expected him to get. So everybody's pretty much, bar a couple of guys at the end of the bench, maybe everyone else is pretty much ready to play whenever their name is called, which is unusual at this level.
And I think even the guys like Jaden Springer, who's been probably the most out of the rotation, like, I forget which game this was, but just last week he played like 10 minutes in a game. He honestly didn't do like that much in his opportunity, but he got that chance. Some guys have capitalized on it, and then they get 4 opportunities. Some guys have had 1, and then you don't see them again for a month, and they get another one, right? So, like, I think Jordan Walsh, he's actually been pretty good in his minutes, so that at least, the main thing, the way I describe Jordan Walsh is that he's at least a net neutral there. Like, he's not making mistakes. He's kind of just hiding, which is all you can really ask for as far as somebody with, his profile and, where he's at in his development.
And you're building his confidence. Trust me.
Yeah.
Whether you see it on the court or not, whether it translates into him hitting a 3 from the corner or missing a 3 from the corner, that's not really that important. It's really not. I mean, everybody gets all excited because somebody makes 1 3, but that's not really where the value comes in putting him in the game. The value is that he's out there, and guys are getting used to him being out there with them, and he's getting comfortable being on the court. And that 3, the next time he takes that same 3, I was just thinking about, because he had a wide open 3 yesterday, and he missed it. It's a big deal,
Yeah. Previous game he made too.
But he took it,
Yeah.
But he took it, and he's getting more and more comfortable with what he's doing. And again, you don't know how much you're going to need these guys, and undoubtedly the teams that go all the way, they need players coming off the bench more than maybe they anticipated. And the risk factor of success is going up as these guys get a little bit more time out on the court during the regular season. So it's all, again, these guys are going to be fine. If I had to put my money on a team to win the championship right now, I still put my money on the Celtics for sure. I still feel they're the best team in the NBA, and they will turn this, they'll turn the corner on what's going on right now.
Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up there. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Hopefully this made you feel a little bit better, or at least gave you another perspective, because I know a lot of people are just frustrated when the story becomes about effort, because they're like, they're making so much money. Why aren't they trying harder? I bought a ticket. So it just helps give a little perspective, because as my dad said, he played professional basketball for, 16 years overseas?
16 years, and some of them were a lot.
How many championships did you win, though? That's what I want to know.
I don't remember.
Oh, it doesn't sound good.
I've been in 4 Game 7s. How's that?
4
Oh, 4 Game 7s. I don't remember what happened.
Oh, God. We shouldn't take your advice if you're 0-4 in Game 7s.
It's all blur.
Okay. Well, thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll probably have you back. If people enjoyed what they had to hear, I'll have to kind of poll the viewers, see if you get invited back for another show.
Oh,
and then we'll be back on CLNS with a post-game show tomorrow. After the game, New Year's Eve. Where else could you spend it if not with the Garden Report? And then I'll be on the road, so I'll be with some live updates starting in Houston, and we'll be kind of traveling along. And actually, there's quite a lot of road trips this upcoming month. So the homestand was December, and there's really a lot more on the road here. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Father, for joining, and enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone.